Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Wooster City Council. This Monday, April 16, 2018. It's after 7:30 p.m. Just a reminder, because this is near and dear in my heart, you have a little more than 24 hours to file your income tax return or get an extension. Next regularly scheduled meeting will be Monday, May 7th, 2018. If you would, Mr. Paulo, please call the roll.
Mr. Ansel?
Here.
Mr. Stanzik?
Here.
Mr. Cavan?
Here.
Mr. Myers?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Silvestri?
Here.
Ms. Warden? Here.
Full complement, so we have a quorum. The agenda will remain as presented. And at this time, I would ask you to join the Worcester City Council in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, I would entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes from the April 2, 2018 council meetings. Motion to approve by Mr. Silvestri.
Second.
Second by Mr. Ansel. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The minutes of April 2, 2018 have been approved. Welcome, Mayor. Turn this portion of the council meeting over to you. I'm glad you're here. I was hoping you'd bring some spring weather, but
Me too.
I was watching the news today, and they showed a picture of Cleveland Stadium, and one of the people said they used to play baseball in that stadium, but
Thank you,
So,
President
welcome.
Bitendike. I appreciate the time to share with council. Just a few things to bring you up to speed with since our last meeting. Joel and I had the pleasure of going down to Columbus on Friday afternoon last week to celebrate both our fire chief and our assistant chief on their graduation from the Ohio Fire Executive course. This has been a 2-year journey for those two. This was their 16th class of the Ohio Fire Executive team. They've been doing it for, I think, 18 years. Am I correct on that, Joel? 18 years that this has been in business. They had to take nearly 200 hours of classes. They did written and submitted had written and submitted 8 assigned papers, read all chapters of 16 books, read 50 or more assigned articles, prepared 2 25-minute presentations, on and on and on. But it was really quite a nice ceremony. We were very proud of our two guys and what they did. It should bring a new level of expertise to our fire division. So these guys took it upon themselves to find this class and sign up for it, and I think that our city will be proud of the crew too for what they did. So just wanted to bring you up to speed on that. Barry Saley and Nathan Murphy were the two. Had the pleasure of swearing in 2 of our new police captains, Tony Lemon and Victor Nadoma, at the end of last week also. So that's given us some broader administrative help within the police division, and hopefully will help streamline some operational things. So nice to have those 2 gentlemen who've been stalwarts within our police department for many years in a different leadership role there. Since the last time, there was a group of us who were doing something called Bridging Bell. It was put together by the College of Wooster. And Scott Myers, a council person, was on it, Sue Smale, a commissioner, and Sandra Hall from the community, and myself in my position, were all part of it. It was really a way to interface and interact with college students and to hopefully make the town and gown type of thing, which we really don't have in Worcester, but to help foster relationships and conversations between the town people and also the students and faculty of the College of Worcester. It was really well done. This is the first time they tried it, and it was 4 different meetings of small groups, and then one full meeting where we had everybody together, and we did a service project. And I hope they continue it. It was really very well done, and made some nice friends with some of the college kids there. Today we did a OARDC tour, and our thanks to Dave Benfield and Rhonda Billman and Dave Koshar, Bill Koshar, for helping us do that. It actually was inspired by Tim Monet. He's got a cousin from Romania for about a month who was working to become an agricultural engineer. And he had another gentleman who was a friend of his along, who actually happened to be mayor of their city over in Romania for 12 years. And so he didn't speak really much English, so we didn't have a chance to converse a lot, but it was just a nice presentation by OARDC of what they do within our community and some of the work that's going on out there. So we have great partners within the Ohio State University and Ohio Agricultural Research and Development Center. You've got something in front of you tonight that has been at least a year in the works, our planning and zoning code update. And it is a very large volume of work, and it's something we do every 10 years, which we should. And there's been a group of 12 community members and 5 staff from the City Hall who've been involved in that process. We've had lots of very good discussions concerning it. And Craig Sanders has been on here from the City Council, and Sandra Hall, and Louise Keating, and the whole number, and Andrew's got the whole list if anybody wants to hear what those are or get a copy of that. But our thanks to that group for leading the charge and wrestling with a lot of things. And I think you've got a group of people here tonight that are also interested in planning and zoning code, and that's a good thing. So please read what you can. I know you can't devote days and days to our planning and zoning code, but there are some real interesting parts, and it is a guiding document for our city. So our thanks to Wendy Muller, who's been the consultant for us for a year with the planning and zoning code, and she's done a great job. That's what she does for the day job, and goes to all kinds of communities and gives them help with planning and zoning codes. We're here to help with any discussions or with insight into how decisions might have come about. But with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Now, we do have a petition for transfer of a liquor license. Would you please read it, Mr. Paula?
Okay, so the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, it's from Bueller's Food Markets, their name change due to the purchase by Sticks Acquisition LLC, 3540 Burbank Road, Worcester, Ohio, 44691. They're looking for the D1, D2, D6 permit. And I also received a second notice because it is a liquor agency, so they're going for that notice also.
All right. And if you recollect, my guess is Mr. Cavan wants to recuse himself.
Yes, please, from any discussion vote, thank you.
Okay, so please note that Mr. Cavan has recused himself with regard to these 2 petitions. So, as you recollect, we have 3 options. We can ask for a hearing here, we can ask for a hearing down in Columbus, or we can waive the hearing. What's your pleasure, council?
Motion to waive hearing, Mr.
Motion
President.
to waive hearing by Mr. Ansel, second by Mr. Costanza. Would you please call the roll on the waiver of the hearing?
Ansel?
Yes.
Costanza?
Yes.
Cavan? Oops.
Abstain or
Abstain.
recuse.
Recused. Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri.
Yes.
Warden.
Yes.
Okay, if you would, Mr. Paul, would you notify him we waived the hearing on both these petitions by Sticks Acquisition? That brings us to communications from the public. Some people have written, and I already talked to Mr. Barnard about the zoning, and he's going to make a presentation at the time we have the public hearing. I see Janice Gallagher also wants to speak on the zoning. Do you want to speak now, or do you want to speak at the public hearing, or do you want to speak at both? I will give you your choice.
Are you speaking to Janice Gallagher?
Yes,
I'll talk right now.
okay.
I'm Janice Gallagher. I live at 241 East Beverly. I have lived there for 40 years. No, 45. And I raised 4 children in this town. I'm here to talk about the change in the language. But before I do that, I want to thank all of you because you received calls from me. Thank you for those of you who answered the phone. Thanks to you for calling me back. Thanks for you who made personal appearances to talk to me about it, and I really appreciate that. I'd also like to thank Mr. Dunn. He must think I need a friend because he talked to me 3 times.
Well, Andrew needs a friend too, so thank you.
Works out, Janice. Glad to hook you up.
But I want you to know that he did his job, he called me back, and I come here tonight and I'm so confused. Even though, this is what I'm confused about. The change in the language says that the smooth finished side of the fence shall be the side of the fence that faces outward from the yard being fenced. And that has been dropped from the current language. That was a major concern to me because I'm all about neighbors being positive with each other, and I'm all about keeping Wooster beautiful. So I was really concerned when I saw that that was going to be dropped from the language. Mr. Dunn explained to me that it would appear someplace else on page 123. I didn't feel like doing that. I just trusted him that it must be someplace else. In our conversations, I asked Mr. Dunn, what happens? What happens to me, a lifelong resident of Wooster, homeowner, and I don't want to follow that? Then what happens to me? And he explained to me that I could apply for a variance. And then the variance would be given to the zoning commission, and they would make a decision. So, then I'm still totally confused. So I called him back, and I said, hey, wait a minute. Why are we dropping this out of here, even if it appears someplace else? Why can't it be where it is? I don't get this. Is it because you've had too many variances presented to your committee? And he said, no, we've only had a couple. Then I say, well, I just am not getting this. If it's not making your committee run more efficiently and it's confusing to me, I don't understand why it can't be there. So that I'm all about assuring that neighbors remain neighborly. I'm all about assuring that Worcester stays beautiful and that people in the community understand. And then Scott Myers said, yes, you should come. Of course I will represent you. But you are such a more eloquent. It was something like that. So,
Thank you for coming.
thank you. You need to come.
Since the question's posed, can you clarify this mass confusion?
The section requiring fencing the face-up remains. We just moved to a general requirement section of fencing rather than, I think it was in design and materials. So like a lot of the code, things got shifted around a little bit to.
So it's just been renumbered or reoriented under a different subcategory.
Correct, basically the entire code is
Right.
renumbered, reordered, there's nothing that's the same numbering, so it's just kind of shifted maybe a page and what.
So you'll attest on your honor to Ms. Gallagher that that provision that the shiny or smooth side or good side still must face towards the neighbors.
That is correct.
Okay.
And the street.
On the street.
And the street.
Outward of the property.
Yeah. It's just been moved somewhere else than where you're used to looking at it, but the whole zoning code's been renumbered, some of it's been pared down, some of it's been expanded, so it's still in there, it's just been placed under a different section, so. That portion will remain, and someone can't put as some people have referred to it, the crappy side of the fence facing towards your property, okay?
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I know Mr. Barnett said he was going to speak at the public hearing, so I'm going to go down. Mr. Garris, you wish to speak about the liquor control notice?
I was still on that.
Oh,
Same
yes,
one.
and I haven't gotten down to that far yet.
Okay.
You-
I didn't know if you
You're
wanted
number
to-
4, Mr.
Yeah.
Garris is number 3. See, I got public school math
I just didn't know
education.
if you wanted to stay on one topic instead of switching topics.
Well, I was just going down, and I couldn't tell what you were. You were on 2018-027?
No, I'm on the fence.
Are you Lisa? Are you Lisa? Are you Lisa?
I am.
Well, you wrote the wrong ordinance down, which is why I didn't recognize you.
Okay.
So,
I don't think I wrote any number down.
well, someone did.
Okay.
And I'm not a handwriting analyst, so
Okay.
now you've got me on the fence.
Maybe Greg will.
And it might be that Greg wrote on 2 lines too, so we'll just go with Greg and then get to you.
I'll take the blame. I wrote on 2 lines. My name is Greg Harris. I live at 347 North Grant Street. I signed up to speak on 2 topics this evening. First is the liquor control notice. I'm just wanting to bring an observation to the crowd here and at home that, as far as I recall, the city administration and council put medical marijuana on a moratorium for a year. Yet it's a known fact that alcohol is the #1 killer in America for Americans.
And
that's not
what does this have to do with the liquor
My
control?
point is already made, that why aren't we putting a moratorium on something that's killing people, and we are on something that isn't?
All right, could you move on to your
Yes,
next
yes.
subject matter,
My point is
please?
made. All right. Then I wrote to speak on Resolution 2018-027, and that's with this agreement with Wayne County Commissioners for the prosecution of municipal ordinances by the Wayne County prosecutor and for payment for such services. I'm opposed to paying, at this moment, anything further to the Wayne County prosecutor's office because we seem to be having such trouble recently getting facts out from current ECI investigations, state prosecutors coming down here to prosecute criminal activities by our police force, and yet the prosecutor's office is recusing itself time and time again. It's almost like it's a lame duck prosecuting office. So my criticism is that I wish that maybe, as I'm opposing this, we get some answers from the administration. What were the crimes? Who committed the crimes before we...
Well, that has nothing to do with the prosecutor's
Wayne County
contract.
I'm sorry?
That has nothing to do with the prosecutor's contract. You've gone off the subject matter, so I will note your opposition to paying for the prosecution of crimes here in the city of Worcester.
Because it says here municipal crimes. And I'm not off subject because my point is, we don't know if these accusations are municipal.
Well, that has
or something
nothing to do with the ordinance, and of course, we're here to act on the ordinance. If you have issues with the dissemination of information, you need to talk with the administration directly. Thank you. All right, Ms. Wagner, do you want to speak now, or do you want to wait until we get to the public hearing, which we're just about ready to roll into? Okay. So that concludes our committee reports, or our petitions and communications from public. No committee reports, we didn't have a committee meeting. So we do have the public hearing, which will be chaired by Mr. Sanders, who's chairman of the Laws and Ordinance Committee. So without further ado, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will call our public hearing to order here regarding the amendments to the Planning and Zoning Code and zoning map for the city of Wooster. Our first item of business here this evening will be Mr. Dutton has a few words here to start us off, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. You have the complete proposed zoning code in front of you, as well as a memo with the breakdowns, maybe 5 or 6 pages long. And I try to go through every chapter and highlight more significant changes. I like to take this opportunity to kind of just hit the high notes, the really major changes to the code, or areas that you might want to concentrate on. As the mayor mentioned, we've been at this for about a year now. In May of 2017, we started the process with Laws and Ordinance Committee meeting and a steering committee meeting. Since that time, we've had about 10 steering committee meetings, 4 Laws and Ordinance committee meetings, 2 public meetings, and at every regular meeting of the Planning Commission, they've been informed of the changes and said address. So now, a year later, we're here in the adoption process. As I mentioned before, it's basically a complete rewrite or reorganization of the code. The current code has 3 titles, and it's chapters 1101 to 1195. We reduced this substantially to 1101 to 1135, and we've got rid of the titles. It's actually 71 pages less than the previous code. It actually absorbed a chapter as well, which I'll talk about a little bit. And the copy draft, the digital copy is hyperlinked, which I find very useful when bouncing around in different sections. Actually, I find it easier to read electronically than on paper. One of the major changes was the Design Review Board chapter was previously in the administrative code at 155. The Design Review Board has a lot of similarities with planning and zoning. I'm the staff liaison to the board. They made recommendations to the Planning Commission and Council. So those were brought in to the Planning and Zoning Code. So their review chapters are with the other boards and commissions. They share similar processes. Their architectural standards are in the architectural standards for the other boards. So this was kind of a common sense consolidation of that chapter, which is going to be removed and brought into the Planning and Zoning Code. We also had some changes to the Planning Commission to align with other boards and with similar boards all over the country. They're reduced from 9 members to 7 members. Usually 7 or 5 is a common makeup of a planning commission. Their terms were reduced from 6 years to 3 years, also in line with the other boards and commissions. And the planning commission was all right with these changes to their commission makeup. There was, most of the chapters just had things moved around and some relatively minor changes. The sign chapter was completely rewritten. This is due to the case of Reed versus the town of Gilbert, which basically affects the way we can regulate signs. The basic change is you can no longer regulate a sign based on what it says. You're more limited to size, height, setback, things of that nature. So the code was rewritten to conform with that Supreme Court ruling. Most of the standards, such as area and setbacks, carry over from the last code. Those are things we could continue to regulate. There was also a section in our previous sign code which required all signs to come in compliance with the effective code by 2020. Looking at some background of the signs we had, we found about half our freestanding signs did not meet the current code. And the burden of implementing this and forcing so many businesses to basically put up new signs was not real practical. There were also some questions of the legality of forcing someone to take down a sign which they received a permit for. The plan district section, our chapter, was another chapter that was completely rewritten. Plan districts are usually usually a larger property in which there's special circumstances or there's something that the city wants to do a little bit differently that doesn't fit with the code. It's often has a mix of uses or a large area that's preserved. That's actually from Dublin, Ohio, which is pretty much the poster child for planned districts. The previous chapter was lengthy, it was over 30 pages. It was a bit confusing, and really people avoided it because it was not really usable. So the chapter was rewritten, really trimmed down. It gives a lot more flexibility to council and the planning commission to come up with a plan district that makes sense and is functional when put in place. The last laws and ordinance meeting, we had some discussions about medicinal marijuana. We got kind of a wide berth of feelings of prohibiting it or allowing it anywhere you would allow retail or a similar type establishment. So our proposal is kind of a middle ground. Was to allow dispensaries as a conditional use in the C3 district. So that's the most intense commercial district. That would be Burbank Road, Cleveland Road, Akron and Portage, so kind of the high-intensity commercial areas. And as a conditional use, we need approval of the planning commission and wouldn't be permitted by right. So cultivation and testing and processing is kind of the second half of medicinal marijuana. It's proposed as a conditional use in the I-1, which is office limited industrial, and permitted use in general industrial districts. So you can kind of see on the map, that's kind of the blue that kind of circles the city there, is the industrial districts. And regardless of what we put in place, all of these must be 500 feet from a school, church, library, playground, park by state law. So that's also in effect. So you have these district requirements, plus you'll have some kind of circles around schools and things like that where they can't locate. And based on your previous resolution or ordinance, once these code changes go into effect, the moratorium, medicinal marijuana will be removed. As we just talked about, we had some changes to fencing. It was previously located in all different sections, residential, commercial, industrial, multifamily. It's now all in one section. I said the finish side must face out. There was also a change to the materials and style. The current code says the whole property has to have the same style and color of fence. The proposal was to change that to must have the same style and color visible from the street. So you can have different privacy fencing in the front, and then if you have poles or rear, you have a different kind of fencing. We found the current code to be difficult for some to meet, particularly if there was already fencing on the site, and a little bit overburdensome. There were also changes to the zoning map. So you have the current zoning map on the left and proposed on the right. It only really looks different when you get close up. There's some changes to industrial districts. Manufacturing M districts were changed to industrial districts. It's just really a term change. We combined the M2 and M4 districts into the new I2 district. They were already pretty similar, and there are currently only two M4 districts. One has Daisy and one's area south of settlements has limited developability. So those were combined just to the I2. We also combined two commercial districts, the C2 and C3 to a new community commercial. We currently have 5 commercial districts, which is kind of a lot. And the C2 and C3 are already pretty similar, so it made sense just to combine them into one. There were also a couple of districts that were eliminated or discontinued. The Campus, Professional, Research, and Office District was a designation for 2 properties, one on Seacrest Road on the north side, and the other one on Akron Road where the Montessori School is. The chapter is pretty long and detailed and doesn't really apply to those 2 properties anymore, particularly the Montessori School, which is a school. So they proposed to rezone to CF, which fits into what their future uses might be, or current and future uses might be. Also, the R5 district, which is manufactured home park, was discontinued, so it's still on the books, it's still on the map, there's still regulations. However, no new manufactured home park districts can be created. So that's kind of the 5 or 10 minute overview of 300 plus pages of changes. Wendy Mueller, Premise Point Planning, is also here to answer any questions. We did a lot of heavy lifting on this, and between the two of us, we can, yeah.
Does anyone on council have any specific questions related to what Mr. Dutton just discussed? Mr. Cavan?
Yes, thank you. What exactly is the change with the RT, with the blue now meeting? This is so small, I can't really see where that is. But with the RT, it's showing here the current and then the proposed,
Discuss these issues.
this area here.
Yeah, that's an existing factory.
That's fine.
Corner of Palmer and
That's
I didn't really figure we were going to have a conversation.
south side of Knoll, west of Palmer, north of the tracks.
International paper.
Is that where, no, is that where the tower,
That's fine.
it was the grain, is that where that is?
I'm not sure.
You say west of Palmer?
West of
back by
Palmer,
Friendly Wilson.
north of the tracks, south of Knoll.
North of
Landmark.
the tracks.
Is it
Is that
by-
Landmark the grain?
Landmark grain silo.
Right.
I don't know, I'm not sure why it was zoned RT to begin with. It's a large industrial site. I don't know how it would ever be developed as houses, so. There were a lot of changes in the map that were kind of errors.
Is that the only change you see in the RT? It's the
There was
only,
some areas,
Excuse me a second. I guess I did this incorrectly. If Mark, if you can hold those questions, and Andrew, if you can hold a response, we'll let the public speak, and then we'll get back into this when we do this here, because
That's fine.
we're the second item on the agenda tonight, so we can do this then. But I want to I guess we'll let the public have their piece and speak their piece, and we can digress, or we can digest the nuts and bolts of the next portion here. So at this point, I'll open this up to the general public for our public hearing. So at this point, whoever wishes to speak to that, please stand up, state your name,
I
and,
think Brian Barnard and Ms. Wagner both have signed it.
okay,
Speak.
all right. Mr. Barnard, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President Lysak, ladies and gentlemen, council, my name is Brian Barnard. I live at 418 North Walnut Street. That's for me. I'm here today representing about 63 citizens here in Wooster. If I may approach here, Mr. Sanders, I have a list of some people who have signed and asked me
Oh,
to
okay.
speak on their behalf today. I'd like to make that part of the record.
Sure.
I've also outlined a little bit about the fencing regulation, and that's all that I want to speak to council about tonight, and the change to that section. You heard Mr. Dutton go over a number of highlights in the new zoning, new sections of the code here. I just want to speak briefly about the section concerning the fencing. As it's written now, all fences, and we're talking about either privacy fences or ornamental fences, they need to match each other on a property. A homeowner is required to have fencing that looks the same. That's the current status of what the ordinance is. They've now at least proposed to change that simply by making the fence have to be unified both in style and color as it is now, but now only when it's visible from the public street or public right-of-way. I'm here on behalf of those citizens. We're questioning that language. Why is it there? Why is it being proposed? And what is the use of that new language for the citizens of Wooster? I'd submit, first of all, that we would have potentially mismatched fences going up, potentially multicolored fences going up on properties. I'm envisioning a worst-case scenario where you have somebody with some sort of metal fence, vinyl fence, put together with chain link, and nothing would stop that person from going out with some paint and saying, you know, green, I like some days, I like red some days, I like yellow some days, and going out and spray painting or painting their fence different colors. So we have this, what we would call, what I would generally call as a citizen, an extreme eyesore. And under this new proposed ordinance, my neighbor can do that to me, as long as the general public can't see it from the roadway. Very curious language to me, and I don't understand it, neither do the 63 or so people I've asked, not all of them to come tonight, out of respect to council. We're not going to fill the place here, but I think if each of you, I would ask, would go out and discuss this with some of your people in your wards, I think you'd probably find people would have this concern generally across the board. I think the names there that we have represent kind of the cross-section throughout each of the wards, but there's a real concern here. And to take it a little bit further, as far as the concern is concerned, this whole issue, as far as when I got involved, was brought up. There was an application for a permit by Jay Hendel. Jay, one of his entities owns the old Yenny property over on Oakley, about a 4.5 acre estate in Wooster. And he wants to put up a 410-foot long vinyl privacy fence that stretches all along the lake that's back there. Eventually, I think as part of the master plan, connect this to maybe even several hundred other feet of vinyl privacy fence going down what would be the north side of that property. Now, he has a number of different fences on that property. They're ornamental, iron, all different sorts of fences. And again, I got involved in this when I was asked to come to a zoning board of appeals meeting after Mr. Henford had made an application for a variance because his permit was denied. The matter was taken up at the zoning board, and the board voted, no, you cannot have a variance. We're not going to allow it. We don't know exactly the reasoning behind that because the audio was not working at the time. So it was decided that there would be another hearing on this variance issue. And I got involved and was preparing to come and speak in opposition to the variance. The variance, the evening we were to argue it, was tabled. And we come back the next time for it, and the issue is dismissed. It's been withdrawn. And at least one of my clients spoke with a member on the zoning board of appeals who had said initially to her, you winning here in the variance stage is merely a Pyrrhic victory. And he went so far as to say, because it's not going to matter, city council is going to change the rules. It doesn't sit well with my clients, and I don't think it sits well with a number of the citizens here. I see no reason to change the current language in what our eyes appears to be to appease one property. We would ask the council, again, to strongly consider not passing this portion of the new proposed legislation. We believe that as a common good, this just doesn't do it. Again, I want to express that the real problem here is hodgepodge fences in your neighbor. Your neighbor has no recourse against that if you change, allow this portion of the law to be changed. So with that, I'd like to thank council for hearing me today, and on behalf of my clients here, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Wagner? No?
Mr. Barnett spoke. I don't think-
That was, his topic was your topic.
Ditto.
All right, very good.
One more thing?
Absolutely.
Well, you know, I drove around town, and I looked at fences, and I checked the people who were not following the rules. rules, you know? And one of my phone calls to Mr. Dillon today, I said, what's going to happen to those people that are not following the rules? Because I'm looking at the back side of the fence at 241 East Beverly. You can check it if you want to. And he said, well, Janice, in 2007, when that ordinance was passed, the person probably put it up before that. So their grandmother did. And you're going to have to look at that until that fence goes down. And then they'll apply for a permit, and then they'll have to fit the rules. Well, if I understand what the attorney just said, the same thing could happen here. If you pass this, and it comes to be all the things that he says might happen, then all of those neighbors will have to put up with that until you rewrite the zoning code again, 10 years or until the fence disintegrates. So, you know, I'm here, as I told you, for 2 reasons. Positive relationships among neighbors and keeping the city of Worcester beautiful. That's why I'm here. I guess thanks for letting me talk again.
Certainly.
I guess I do have something to say.
Please.
I'm Lisa Wagner, and I live at 652 Meadow Lane, and Jan's topic, or statement here, just prompted me to say something. When I originally spoke to Mr. Dutton, he told me the current language was put in for a specific property on Palmer Street, which I think is borderline unconstitutional to put something in for one specific person. And if indeed we're changing it again, for one specific person, you know, that doesn't sit well with anybody I've spoken to. And I think it looks pretty bad on the city if that is the case. I was also told, well, it's not fair for somebody that owns a large property to have to do that. Smaller properties, it's more feasible, but a large property, it's just not fair. But that's like saying because you have more money, more clout, you don't really have to follow the rules. And I find that pretty disturbing. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garris.
I've done a lot of campaigning over the years, and I've had to go to a lot of doors knocking. I've seen a lot of fences too. And I know when I tried to campaign in some areas that were associations, in my opinion, which had unreasonable rules, but those people want to live in those association neighborhoods, have to agree to those rules of not being allowed to put campaign literature up in their windows or allowing themselves to do anything in regard.
And this has to do with fencing how?
This has to do with fencing how. I'm afraid that if we get too strict with these rules, that the city becomes a great association, that no one has the freedom to do anything in their yard, that if my fences, and I don't have any, are eclectic or artsy and this shape or that shape and might offend my neighbor, well, my neighbor's fence, which might be white and acrylic, could offend me. That's my point. The associated neighborhoods, I don't think, are free-minded enough for me. I would never want to live in them. And I don't want to see the city of Worcester becoming like that kind of a closed-minded, in my opinion, little enclave.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes, from the public, that wishes to speak at the public hearing? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Scott Rebane, 101 Getty Circle, the other side of the property in question. To me, if we're talking about, in specific, this one property, the issue to me is not the size of the property. The issue is that there's one family, or one house, or whatever you want to call it, that did not succeed in the process of getting a variance. So they're trying to make the end run around that. If there's, like it was stated before, there's only a couple issues that appear before y'all regarding this kind of issue, what is the point of changing the law? Why don't we just have those go through the variance process that went through before? Apparently that issue failed for them before, and now they're trying to make an end run around that. I don't see the purpose in changing the law when, that's the purpose of the variance, is to address issues like that. Whether the property be huge or small or eclectic, I don't think it has anything to do with RT fences versus, building, some utopian place. But, to me, that seems like, the appropriate place to deal with issues that are being addressed now is in the variance committee. So, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
This is my first city council meeting, so no protocol. Are we specifically speaking to zoning now or any issue?
Anything that has to do with the changes in the zoning code, yes.
Then I have another comment, different comment.
Okay.
If I understood Mr. Dutton correctly, did you say that at the current time, the medical marijuana dispensaries are around the peripheral city outline until the moratorium is lifted?
No, what he said is if and when we approve these changes, in that change in the zoning code is going to be a change in that zoning map, which then will put those items into those areas as he described, which basically will be, in layman's terms, in the periphery or around the perimeter of the community. Yes, ma'am.
I've had a lot of airtime, but I just want to ask another question on the signage.
Okay.
Does that include the political signs? Or is that just talking about signs for stores and things?
It's all signs. Yeah, the chapter applies to all signs in the city.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Connie Rebane, homeowner at 101 Yanni Circle. Wife to Scott Rebane, who just spoke. I've remained very neutral in this particular concern about the fencing, just in fairness of good neighbors, good community, and so forth. And I've enjoyed sitting here, listening to everybody's feedback. I think for me, I have a question then. Why change it with the language of this public street view? Can anyone answer that? Explain why is that changing or proposed to be changed?
Well, I mean, as the only council member that sat through a majority of those committee meetings related to the specifics of making these changes, there was a number of topics or a number of times it was discussed about, okay, we want to keep a consistent look along the street frontages, but yet give the homeowner an opportunity to have some flexibility inside that their property line. And so consequently, that was really not, had nothing to do with the at least as far as I'm concerned, it had nothing to do with what I've heard this evening about this mass idea that we're going to change this to let one person get their way. That was not the conversation that I was privy to, nor was it the conversation that I had in the committee meeting when we had this conversation.
When was that committee meeting?
What's that?
When was that committee meeting?
I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember. We've had 6 or 8 of them over the course of the last year. But at the end, but the bottom line is that with that, the thought was just to try to allow the homeowner to have some level of flexibility.
Is there a reason, has there been a problem that people were complaining when they didn't have flexibility?
Not that I'm aware of, but I will say that also in a lot of zoning, in a lot of times in related to zoning and specifically the updates, the 10-year updates that every city does, when we sit down and talk, we sit down and have a conversation amongst a committee, and we also then we pay a professional that does this with with multiple communities throughout the year, throughout every year. to advise us in terms of what are the new hot buttons, if you will, as we're going through looking at zoning changes. And we did this with, we went through, I guess, because I sat on that committee too, related to our charter review. And we just simply asked them, as we go through it, they say, okay, well, these are the items that we're seeing that communities are discussing.
Did they propose it, or did one of our zoning people?
Again, I'll be candid, I don't remember. I can't say.
That'd be interesting to know.
Well, I don't want to consume the whole meeting. Please, go back.
Ms. Wagner and I are on the same page in the situation. We just have concerns of why something is changing where potentially it hasn't had a major impact. There has been major concerns in the past with it. And I'm all for advancing and changing and being more modernized, and I respect that you've asked upon other resources to help the city look at those things.
Mm-hmm.
But in this particular circumstance, I just don't feel like any of us have really gotten a solid, concrete, really valuable answer of why. And I know even from in a neighbor situation, regardless of who my current neighbors are, if different fencing went up on their property, even though I'm not looking at their property from a public street, it may not be as aesthetic to see. So I think that it's important to take that consistency into play here and think more through those situations.
Well, I think we fought through the situation, but thank you for your.
Absolutely.
What's that? Okay.
I don't know if you want us to address them
Please.
now or.
Please help me out.
Hello, I'm Lee Muller. We were just having a conversation about when it was, and it looks like we discussed that probably November or December of last year.
Okay.
I, along with Mr. Sanders, I think we're on the same page. When we were having a discussion of the committee, I was not made aware of the history of the existing language, which is that the same design, style, and color has to apply to all the sides, nor was I made aware of any upcoming cases or anything like that, as I think you mentioned today. So we were just going based on general discussions about what's worked and what have been issues. And one of the things I'd like to point out is you're the only community that I've seen that requirement. Part of the reason is, and there's always unusual cases, but part of the reason is when somebody moves in and wants to put up a fence, if they've got a neighboring fence, that rule would require them to either match that fence or install their own new fence.
It says or, it doesn't say you have to.
Please let me finish, yeah. It would require, so either let's say your neighbor has a wooden fence, they would have to match that to have all the same style in the design. Or they could build their own fence, let's say they want to do something different, adjacent to it, because all fences are on your own property lines. So I believe that the purpose and the discussions we had with the entire committee was to make sure that, there was some flexibility that, again, if you said, hey, my neighbors have fenced me in on 3 sides, maybe with different fencing, that I don't have to go in and put in an entire similar fence along my interior, but that the stuff that you can see on both sides of the home, for example, would match in the street. So that's where that came out of. Whether or not there were any cases going on at the time, I don't know if that's why this discussion came up. It was just one of those things that, they asked me, is this something you see elsewhere? And my response is no. So we talked about, as a committee, what was kind of important. And I know that the view from the street was more important from the city's perspective than mandating that, what's inside the property that's not quite as visible is.
Ms. Mueller,
Yes.
that'd be an example like when I bought my house 30 years ago, older neighborhood. The backyard on 3 sides had a chain link fence. And out front, we wanted something a little more decorative. If we were to be held to those standards, then I couldn't have my nice little short scalloped picket fence that is for decorative effect as opposed to keeping people in.
That's my understanding how the current rules are applied, so.
It's
And I don't
actually
know.
not, in the zoning ordinance, it says that decorative fences do not apply. So you can have a different decorative fence in the front and chain link or whatever in the back already.
There's very specific definition of decorative fence, it's like wrought iron and things like that, like a scalp.
It says little picket fences, it says you can have a
And
variety of different.
when I put mine up, I think it was well before they had changed the zoning, so, mine went up 30 years ago, but
But it says you can have a decorative fence in front, it does not have to follow the rules up. It's not even defined as a fence as far as zoning ordinance says fencing is. It says fencing has to enclose an area. So.
And then to address very quickly the question about political signs, it does. But that, one of the major changes to the signs is, again, as Andrew pointed out, you can no longer regulate based on content. So where we used to be able to say, hey, real estate signs, you have these rules, political signs, you have these rules. How do you determine if it's a real estate political sign? You look at the message. So you're regulating those signs based on the message. We had to get away from that. The exception that we had a lot of discussion about legally is that the Reed versus Kilbert case still appears to allow communities to regulate differently for commercial signs versus non-commercial signs. So we do maintain those distinctions in non-commercial signs, which are your political signs, opinion signs, I love the city signs, whatever. Those are still pretty much allowed as long as they're not in the right of way. It's a basic thing. We don't get into how many you can have. So we are far more liberal with the non-commercial free speech sign. It's the commercial signs that we have a little bit more restrictions on. So they do, get into the regulation of it, but it's intended to give as much, freedom of speech signage and be a little bit more strict on commercial signage, which up until the Reed case was allowed.
As you know, I didn't read it. So I was particularly interested in political signs and the size of them. Is that going to be regulated?
No, there's no mandate on the size. There is on height and where they're located, so they're not blocking views. But we don't get into, you can only have 4 political signs like that. And again, we were, it's one of those things that depending on the election, there could be a lot of signs or there could be few. And it wasn't really the intent to get into telling people you can only have 4 political signs versus, 8. Which if you go to strictly 100% content neutral, we would have had to put a limit on any signage. So.
Can I ask you one more question? Just to clarify my thinking. During the presidential campaign, I saw an entire sign cover an entire group, a private property. That would be all right.
It depends on how they did it with the roof sign. We have limited temporary signs to the post, like the little banner or the little signs in the yard and banner signs. So we focus on the structure in that case. So I would assume it, but it depends on the particular step.
And how are political signage regulations in these associated communities dictated?
The city does not get involved in third-party agreements, which are the covenants. So that's upon the association doing this. Now it's happening.
But the conflict I ran into was while I was campaigning and I didn't see the signage leading into this enclave because I entered from a back driveway and began campaigning, that my campaign was considered solicitation. And I said, well, if that's how you feel, then how would you expect somebody to represent you if you don't allow them to come in to ask what your concerns are and you consider that soliciting?
But again, that would be outside of the zoning regulations.
Mr. Garris, we're kind of getting off topic again on that. I appreciate your concern for it, but at this point, sir, it does not. It does not. At this point.
Are we talking about political signage?
We are, but the situation is the city allows for a certain, but the association.
The bottom line is that once it's in an association, it's outside of our purview of any ability that we have to control that. So the discussion at this point to have at this particular moment in time is inappropriate. So leave it at that.
I would just like to mention one more thing. You said that this discussion was November, December.
Yeah.
Which would have been immediately after the zoning board denied the variance.
Maybe, I don't know the history of it.
I just wanted to.
Yeah. No, I don't know the history of the cases, and I believe, like you had mentioned, when we were discussing it, and any of the things, I don't recall any discussion of any topic, not just fencing, but them saying, hey, we have this case, and we need to do this. It was just, something that came up as part of the discussions about making sure that the smooth side is still required out. Most communities do require that, and then walking through some of the others. And so I would have to look back to see if it's even something, that we would have said, hey, this is kind of unusual.
I started taking notice of fencing after we read the new language that says as seen from the street. And every fence that I looked at when I was driving through the street, you may not have seen it if you were directly square on with the house, but coming that house up the street from one end or another, you would almost always see, like I couldn't find a single house where I couldn't see the fence, if I looked. So it's a little bit strange to me.
Thank you.
I didn't know, do you have a question?
Will, Mr. Bostins, if you had a question for Mr. Dudman?
Yeah, Andrew, I just want to clarify something. We're going completely different subject here, going back to medical marijuana. When this goes through, we will have those certain areas that would be legal to dispense medical marijuana, right? But you said it's a conditional use? So is there another, what's the hoop they would have to go through in order to finish the process? Yeah.
So dispensaries in the C3 and processing or manufacturing in the I1 would have to go to the planning commission for conditional use approval. So it's basically they would present the use to the commission, there's criteria that it have to meet, and the commission would make a decision, yes or no, if they can go in that location.
But it's that particular zoning location.
Yeah, so C3 for dispensaries, I1 for processing and manufacturing, but I2, which is general manufacturing, would be permitted by right, where it would just be an administrative approval.
Thank you.
Sir?
Just one last comment about the fencing issue. For one, Ms. Muller was saying that basically, from what I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, there hasn't been any issues that the citizens have brought up, that there's way too many applications for variances for fences. That's my understanding. This is not really an issue. I also understand that essentially, she's a consultant, which, and I completely understand the need to have a reworking of codes, all that sort of stuff. Makes perfect sense. What this is doing though, there's a big difference between theory and application. There are issues when we change this law. If this goes through, there are real world implications, and that's the issue. If there was not a problem before, if there wasn't an overwhelming amount of variances regarding fences, why are we changing it? I don't understand what's the purpose of it. I understand, it's nice to have our community match up with somebody else's community and all that, to have a cookie cutter, but I don't see what the issue is. The bottom line is if this does go through, there's going to be a big issue. You're basically putting into law, one particular parcel to be able to basically affect, at least, from their properties, 5, 6 properties?
Well, on one side
And
another 10.
me on the other, and, and basically the whole neighborhood. And to be honest with you, we've lived there now for, 6 years. And we come from a place where everybody has fences. And it was really nice moving here, because there's hardly any fences. I mean, you go through many neighborhoods and you don't see a fence. But the fence that, that we have a problem with is that, it'll be a 5 or 6 foot, plastic fence that's gonna basically close in about 5 or 6 different houses on the backside, and it's gonna be ugly. And just by making this change, which, again, doesn't seem like there's much of a desire or much of a calling for it to change, I don't see the purpose of doing that. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barner?
Mr. Sathers, you mentioned that there was a committee that reviewed this. What was the makeup of that committee? I don't need to know the names, but did you say that there were citizens on that committee?
Correct. Yes.
Approximately how many people?
12 plus 5 staff members. 12 non-staff members and then 5, so 12 members plus staff. And there are members from our planning commission, board of zoning appeals, design review board,
Right.
other members of the community.
Thank you.
Is Dr. McMillan on that?
No.
But you said Sandra Hall was.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Ansel.
Yes. First of all, I want to compliment the hard work that the Zoning Review Board has undertaken to accomplish this substantial review and rewrite process. I chaired the committee 10 years ago, and I remember how dubious and intense, and we had a public turnout of over 100 people here contesting the then issue of signage, and we worked through it, and it's been 10 years that we've not had any major signage issues. And I compliment the committee for furthering the 10-year moratorium or the 10-year grace period before having to comply with signs that are hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace. And I remember vividly Plata 4 just put their brand-new sign up, and it was $150,000, and he was outraged that in 10 years he may have to modify that sign. So it was a wise decision, and now they have grandfather. Now, if that sign blows over and it has to be replaced, it has to fall in compliance. So I just share that specifically. I also want to highlight there is no conspiracy going on here. The dialogue, I'm not saying the timing might, have an appearance of a conspiracy. There's no conspiracy. But this is very simple. I'm a pretty basic and focused operator, business person, and politician or city representative. We have 12 words that were inserted that we could remove when visible from the public street or other public right-of-way, and we maintain a unified color and style throughout, unless in the past language and the new language says different styles of fencing may be permitted on a single property and attempt to match existing fence styles and/or property or existing adjacent fencing, as Mr. Beitendijk highlighted. It works. It's simple. All this dialogue and rhetoric, all we have to do is eliminate 12 words when visible from the public street or public right-of-way, because there is a process. It's called the variance review process, and they can present their case, and logical, objective, unbiased volunteers will look on a case-by-case basis. And if there's that chain link fence that's been properly maintained and somebody wants to put a nice decorative front fence on and there are no complaints, the variance board is going to do that. In the 10 years since our last rewrite, I know of 2 variance requests regarding fences, the current one that you've just alluded to and one that I was involved with. The one was granted to the landowner. That was the one on Billiards, wasn't it, the fence issue?
I remember that.
The vinyl fencing on the demoed property that was a little higher in the frontage than it should have been, that was approved, and this one that was denied. So again, whatever the case may be, let's just keep this simple, and we have consideration as council representatives to do the right thing and make the right decision. The thing that's most amazing to me is after the hundreds of words and additions and deletions and upgrades and modifications, we're down to 12 words, it would appear. Because there aren't any other 67 signatures that highlight that the hard work that the committee and volunteers has done is egregious or problematic. So A+, 12 words on one document, I think we can collectively discuss, and I know what my position will be on it. It's not that difficult. Thank you. Mr. Montgomery?
Make one request. Rather than just saying eliminate those 12 words, to let Andrew and Wendy maybe look through the whole code just to make sure that wouldn't conflict with anything else, and maybe come back with what's a proposal that meets the intent that you're talking, but it might be a little
more than just that one sentence.
Well, I just make the point,
Yes.
having chaired this committee 10 years ago, and knowing Mr. Sanders is doing a great job chairing the committee and the hard work Andrew and the team are involved with, absolutely, for sure. But we're really darn close here, and we spent a lot of time talking about it tonight. Not to minimize your concerns, but it's pretty simple. And simple is pretty efficient, and I like efficient.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what Ms. Gallagher's point was, is if there's not been an overwhelming request for more variances, why would we change it? And it seems as though that might make the most sense. Maybe you certainly let them, the experts, take a look at it, but I think the intent here is not to try to make it any more complicated than it needs to be. I understand what they were going for. I mean, if you have a chain link fence to keep your dog in your backyard and then you put in a pool and you'd like a white wooden fence around your pool, currently that might not be allowed, but again, you can come to the planning and zoning folks, ask for variance, and in that circumstance, I'm pretty sure they probably allow that, so I think that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, well, with that, thank all that have spoken. We obviously will take all this into advisement. At this point, I hadn't planned on having a committee meeting related to this topic, but it appears that we will do that. At this point, I don't have a date for that. More than likely, it will be the second Monday of May, which is, I believe, the 21st.
May 21st.
We will go out for, I mean, it'll go out publicly, but at this point, we'll just probably plan on having a committee meeting prior to the city council meeting on the 21st to have final discussion on this, because at that point, we will need to either vote on it the 21st, or we will need to table it. So at that point, I guess that's the way we'll go. And with that, we'll call this public hearing closed, and we'll move on to the rest of our city council meeting.
All right, I'd like to make one comment,
Oh,
or a couple
okay.
of comments. First of all, it's nice to know the First and Fifth Amendments alive here in the city of Worcester with regard to political signs and us not forcing business people to take down signs that they properly put up. I thank people for expressing their opinions. I would suggest those who, and I know it's popular to distrust government, but those who base some of their opinions on some maybe inappropriate comments by someone or innuendo, if they think the people that work on the boards that we have, be it zoning or planning commission or traffic commission, and those that worked on crafting this proposed zoning ordinance, having done so myself years ago when I was solicitor of Downton, these people are not influenced by what other people think, and I get a little upset that innuendo was going around tonight, and if you dispute that, then I invite you to apply to sit on the board and work with these fine people here at the city of Worcester and work with the other fine citizens that volunteer their time. I have no problem with expressing your opinion, like you, sir, saying if it's worked in the past, why change it now? And, I understand that, but I'm a little perturbed that some people are painted with a broad brush that they were unduly influenced by a specific individual, and I don't think that's fair to the people that crafted this, to the planner, Ms. Moeller, who assures you that she was not even aware of this, and I know Mr. Dutton, and I know he would not have been influenced, it just the timing was bad. So, this is my bully pulpit at the moment, and I appreciate a well thought out, well argued statement. I don't appreciate when people are accused of doing something underhanded, so, unless you have proof of it, and then we'll hang them by the yard arm. So, that being said, let's move into new business, because there is no old business. First reading of ordinance number 2018-008. If you would, Mr. Paulo, please read the title.
Ordinance number 2018-008, an ordinance levying special assessments for the improvement of Burbank Road between certain termini by grading, draining, widening, paving, resurfacing, constructing curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and driveway approaches, constructing a turning lane, installing storm sewers, catch basins, manholes, water mains, fire hydrants, and traffic control signs and devices, and acquiring any real estate and interest, all together with the necessary appurtenances, and declaring an emergency.
You know, the rule is you have to read one like that in a single breath.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead and try it again.
It's a do-over?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. It's slated for 3 readings. It'll be presented by Mr. Bostancic. It shouldn't be anything that we are surprised about, because we've had multiple ordinances leading up to this and resolutions. So, Mr. Bostancic, I turn the floor over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. My description will be a little less lengthy. So, yeah, this is simply a request for the city to levy these assessments for the property owners, portion of the improvements related to the Burbank Road construction. And as Mr. Bidendijk stated, this has had a fairly long history. A resolution of necessity was passed on council on 11/7/2016. Council approved the recommendations of the Equalization Board on March 20th, 2017. And also, council passed the ordinance to proceed on March 2017. And all the, any questions about the assessments or problems with the assessments have already been taken care of. There are no more options really. If someone has a problem with the assessments, that portion has already been dealt with. And this is simply the last piece of the project. Any questions?
Mr. Kobylarczyk, don't we have to, if everyone has an issue, don't we have a
We have an
equalization board, so.
They addressed 4 concerns at the time and made no provisions for any changes.
So,
I would like to point out that there's a 32% reduction because of what the final cost of the project was from the original assessment.
okay. So all the i's have been dotted and the t's crossed. They've had their equalization board. So we're ready to enroll on the project. Is that correct? Do you have a motion for us?
Yes, I would like to take this to third and final to get the process moving.
Okay. Motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Bostancic. Is there a second? Second. Second, Ms. Warden. Would you call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Ansel,
Yes.
Cavan,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Myers,
No.
Sanders,
Yes.
Silvestri,
Yes.
Bostancic.
Yes.
Rules are suspended. Do you have another motion?
I would move to adopt.
Motion adopted by Mr. Bostancic. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? You opposed suspending the rules. Do you have a reason for that you want to question?
I just kind of opposed having to pass things on an emergency basis when we've been working on this for well over a year. We should have probably gotten this before the Thursday before they needed to pass it, which would have given us more time to look at it.
I don't know. We've looked at it. We've had multiple reviews of this. We just want to get the project going, and this allows us to levy the assessments, and everyone who has been assessed has
I
had an
plan to
opportunity.
support the motion, I just oppose the emergency, moving it to emergency, that's all.
Well, there's always a contrary. Anyone else? Seeing none, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Ansel?
Yes.
Cavan?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
Costanza?
Yes.
Ordinance number 2018-008 passes. Ordinance number 2018-009, which has spurred a lot of public comment and discussion, be presented by Mr. Sanders, is slated for 3 readings. I would, based on his representations, figured we'll just have a first reading, but he could throw us a curveball. But before I let you have that opportunity, I'm going to have Mr. Paulo read the title.
Ordinance number 2018-009, an ordinance amending Part 11 Planning and Zoning Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Wooster, Ohio.
Mr. Sanders, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Boydike. Yes, we've already had ample discussion on portions of this revised zoning code, and that's all good. We appreciate everyone that has come and spoke this evening. I mean, at this point, some very interesting points have been made. I do want to go back, though, not so much to the public hearing, but I do want to, I cut Mr. Cavan off earlier in the public hearing. I would like to give him an opportunity to finish his line of questioning that he had, or clarifications regarding the topic that he was discussing.
I think he was talking the RT district.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So, Andrew, you were saying, as far as the RT is concerned, the changes, any other ones other than you had said, was it the west or east side of Palmer?
If you have it on the PDF, it is a little bit easier to read, and I can kind of pinch and zoom in. But another spot we changed from RT to I3 was the south side of South Street, east of Beaver and the railroad tracks. It's mostly houses that have been knocked down east of Wooster Brush. So there may be 1 or 2 houses left.
So that was, which street? South Street, right?
Yeah, south side of South Street, east side of Beaver Street, and then
To the
north of
tracks.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to the east of Worcester Brush. I believe
Well, there's only one house there, I think.
It's one house, if that was on RT, it's
That's
basically,
Henry Street, not South Street.
you're right, yeah, it's Henry Street, yeah, south side of Henry Street.
Right. There's only
Yeah,
one
there's-
house there in their parking lot, right directly
So
across.
north of that parking lot, I think there is one house left, but the development in that area seems to be going towards kind of lighter industrial, maybe Worcester Brush might expand that way or something like that, so that was taken out of the RT. The RT was expanded in a couple of smaller areas, east side of Spink Street, right at the base there, near Liberty, that was C4, that's just a row of houses, so that was taken to RT, and also on the south side of High Street, just west of Gashi. So there were a lot of areas that were kind of flip-flop between industrial and commercial and RT, and we just placed them in what their current land use is, really. I'm not sure why the lines were drawn like that, it didn't seem to make any kind of sense, it might have just been an error. And I think those are really the only areas where the RT changed. Then there's some oddball parcels here and there, which were just, it might have been lot splits or realignments that caused some changes, but they're not really of note.
Okay. Okay, I may have questions later on when we do a rereading. I want to look at this really closely.
Yeah, I think I can put together a map like a blow-up of downtown. You might be able to illustrate a little bit better than this 11 by 17 that I'm trying to read right now. So.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Warden?
Andrew, along the lines of the map, I wonder if it would be possible, or maybe it's in here and I can't get the hyperlink to work,
but would it be possible to include a copy of that map in the actual zoning, planning and zoning document, that if people are reading it, they would be able to link directly to it, as opposed to going out of the PDF and into?
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful. I've tried myself to reference it several times, and it's sort of a hassle to leave the document and find the PDF and search what you're looking
So
for.
it'd be at the end, and there's a link to it.
Well, wherever, in fact, there's, in the table of contents, you've got, it's sort of misleading because I've clicked on it a number of times and it's not ever what I think it's going to be. Page 63, it says official zoning map and district boundaries, but there is no map
There's no
there.
map. I noticed that too. I figured it was me.
I thought maybe it was my computer again or something, but.
Official zoning map, no map.
Right, there's
So
no map.
that's the language adopting that zoning map, so.
Yeah, I understand
There
that.
maybe should be, wherever, anywhere it says official zoning map, it should take you to the official zoning.
That'd be great.
We could do that.
Okay.
That would be great, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, and I had one question, and this is just out of curiosity, but along, I believe this is West Lincoln Way, across from Brandstetter, I see that a very small little wedge of property has changed from R1 to, it looks like M3. And that's a pretty big difference.
So that was a property that the city owns, and we annexed into, it was outside of the city limits, and we annexed it in. It's actually a storage facility now. Was a Kodak garage, I believe, before we annexed it. So if you don't go to council and get a zoning, when you annex it defaults to R1. So that was just in the R1 zoning by default.
Okay.
And this is just kind of clean up, putting it in the industrial district, which it should have been in the first place.
Got it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else on council? Any questions?
You have a proposed amendment? But when do we look?
No.
And
I thought that you guys were going to consider that fencing and come back to us with a possible proposed amendment, is that right?
It seems to, deleting those words seems to bring it back to the current code.
Okay.
So that appears to be what it would do.
So if we want to go back there, you recommend just go back to the current code and not just deleting those.
Yeah, I would say just delete
sentences.
those 12 words, as Mr. Hansel stated, would
And-
take us back to the
and
current.
make sure that other provisions then reflect the same.
Correct, yeah. But
So-
that would be the only.
I was asking our law director if we need a amendment, propose to amend it to.
And then vote. I would motion to amend the existing proposal to reflect the 12-word change in 1113.01E8 and eliminate when visible from a public street or other public right-of-way, and have the amended draft document voted on at a future council meeting.
Seconded.
You want to read all that, what Mr. Hansel said?
Right there it is.
No,
Are you messing with me?
yeah. So we have a proposed amendment to eliminate the change with regard to the fencing ordinance allowing multiple materials to revert back to where if they want to erect something different than they would have to, than what already exists, they would have to go obtain a variance, which is the current law. So basically, your amendment is to go back to the current law with regard to the requirement of a variance should they want to erect something different than already exists. Is that?
I said we could have a committee meeting if it was necessary.
Does that reflect what everyone understands? And there's been
I
a,
guess if we feel it's necessary, we can show that in our vote.
And is that going to, I'm sorry. Is that going to take care of some of the objections then from some of the public we had tonight then?
Almost all of them.
Everyone.
All of them.
I mean,
So
pretty much
we
all
could,
of them.
we could probably just leave the current law as it is then, we don't have to. We can just
Yeah,
replace the one.
But the
Well, no, you have to change it.
existing, or, the proposed ordinance has that language in it, so we want to make sure we have it removed.
Right.
Right, that's what,
That's why
Right.
we're amending the proposed ordinance to reflect that the current law as it stands be substituted therefore.
Let's just clean it up now. We'll just clean it up now.
Yeah.
One less thing to do later.
You have a problem with that, Mr. Sanders? Because
I do not.
I'm gonna be the first one, having worked on a zoning code. I know you did yeoman's duty, and because of elections, like you said, you're the only one that's carried the ball, though.
Yeah, no, I have no issue with this. I mean, I hear what those people are saying. I don't necessarily 100% agree with them, but at this point, if the consensus, at least amongst the 10 people that were here and the 60-some people that signed these petitions, which there's a few addresses there that are suspect that they're even in the city of Worcester, but that all being said, again, not to sound morbid, but it's not a fence I'm going to die on, so at this point, I'm willing to just move along with it.
I hope not.
you're not on the
Then
fence.
so
It
moved,
was,
Mr.
it was
President.
less
So
arduous
moved,
than.
and someone
And
seconded.
I did.
Mr. Myers.
Would you please call the roll on reverting back to, with regard to the provision of using different fence materials must get a variance?
Okay. Cavan,
Yes.
Warden,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Sanders,
Yes?
Silvestri,
Yes.
Costansing.
Yes.
And Hanson.
Yes.
So anyone have anything else? Seeing none, then we'll consider that ordinance number 2018-009 with the amendment as passed tonight to have its first reading. And I want to thank Mr. Dutton and Ms. Mueller. I know that it's always a
We're just going to strike this out.
laborious act to try to change something that's been in effect for 10 years, and
Just striking that.
I just want to say thanks, and sorry you had to suffer some slings and arrows in terms of impugning your integrity, which I know was unfair, but emotions, I think, sometimes get the best of people. I wish everyone was even tempered as Ms. Gallagher here, and I appreciated your comments and questions, and there was no animus there, and unfortunately, there was some from other members in the audience, but thank you very much, and I don't know if you'll ever see some of the citizen members and also your staff. Thank them for their hard work, because as Mr. Ansel said, despite thousands of words of verbiage, it came down to 12 words, so job well done, folks.
Yeah.
That brings us to the first reading of resolution number 2018-027. It is budgeted. It'll be presented by Mr. Ansel, so you will not have to suspend the rules to get it, to make a motion to adopt. But I will have to let Mr. Paulo read the title.
Resolution number 2018-027. A resolution authorizing the Director of Administration to enter into an agreement with the Wayne County Commissioners for the prosecution of municipal ordinances by the Wayne County Prosecutor and for payment for such services.
Mr. Ansel, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank Counselor Applebaum for the packet that she prepared for council supporting this request to renew our annual contract legal services for prosecution through the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. This has been a very viable and justifiable program for 42 years. since 1976. Want to thank the prosecutor's office for their diligence and service and the volume of cases that they've been engaged with. And I think I'll just highlight that when you recognize that last year there was, as summarized by Ms. Applebaum, 2,611 police reports with over 1,006 cases prosecuted. That's significant. And then part of that review process were the over 1,300 that were dismissed or were waiverable offenses. So it is a high-volume activity of which she has outlined in her various graphs based on the level and offense category. So very compelling justification, and to have that full-time representation in court every day to be able to respond to our city's requirements provides great flexibility, and the value provided of $79,980 would be roughly 50% of what our internal cost would be if we tried to absorb those responsibilities. There's a variety of options, but we are all aware that whether we hired a full-time prosecutor with a legal paralegal support, that could be $140,000 to $160,000 or some derivation of that type of service. So it's a wonderful value. We thank the county prosecutor's office. Thank you, Linda, for your justification summary for council and your quantitative data highlighting the return on investment that we are receiving for the services provided. It's a great partnership. I hope it continues throughout my time on council. They are doing a good job, and we're getting bad guys prosecuted, and that's everyone's priority. So, without further ado or questions, I would motion to suspend the rules. This is something we've done. Budgeted. I would motion to adopt Resolution 2018-27.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Ansel, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Jordan. Any other questions, comments?
I did note that if you take the amount we paid in 2017 by the number of cases prosecuted of 1,006, comes to $74 and some change per case, which I think that's a pretty good deal for the city.
I would like to make one further note along those lines. The increase to prior year was based on the 4% across the board increase that the county commissioners provided to their rank and file and employees. So it was just a nice justification type of calculation, and they certainly deserve that raise because they'd been on a wage freeze for several years. So that's where the 4% increase to prior year calculation was derived. So thank you.
Seeing nothing further, would you please call the roll on the motion to adopt?
Costancic?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Sanders?
Yes.
Silvestri?
Yes.
Warden?
Yes.
Ansel?
Yes.
And Cabot?
Yes.
Resolution number 2018-027 passes. This brings us to the miscellaneous portion. And I'll have to say, despite the cold weather, it was rather warm in here this evening. So we'll start with Mr. Myers.
Thank you, President Biden-Dyke. I just wanted to congratulate Officers Nadoma and Lemon for their promotion. I was able to attend the swearing-in ceremony, and it was a very nice event to have there. They had their family members present as well, and so congratulations to Chief Fisher with your new promotions. Two very fine young men on your staff. And then second, as Mayor Brenneman noted, the Bridge and Bell group was an enjoyable experience to work with those people. It was a number of meetings, a community service project. There were, I think, 30 or so people involved overall. And I did get notified they're doing it again next year about the same time of year. So there will be other opportunities if you're interested to keep an eye out for that application. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, at this point with the amendment that we have with the ordinance 2018-009 was an ordinance. For right now, we'll hold off on having any type of committee meeting. We'll see how the conversation goes with the community over the next 2 weeks. And then, depending on what we have in terms of community contact at that time, we'll play it by ear from there. But at this point, yeah, we'll hold off on a meeting. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Segueing temporarily, Mr. Montgomery, do you want to have your presentations that for the 7th?
Yeah, the request was a quarterly financial and then a brief city operational update on the.
6:30?
That should be fine.
Can you give your presentation under 30 seconds? Like normally? All right, so 6:30, we're going to have a presentation of what the heck just happened in the last quarter. Right?
Right.
Okay. That brings us back. Mr. Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank everyone who came this evening and spoke. I think it's good, healthy discussion. I can remember some of the things that Mr. Ansel referred to in terms of our last go-around of changes to our planning and zoning code. And I think anytime anyone comes and makes their concerns known is good, healthy government at work. So I know sometimes people can't help but imply further that, there's other things going on, and I'm happy that, that we have such a fine group of people to work with, both with the administration and the boards and commissions of the city of Worcester. So, but I guess I don't fault them for those types of things. I know when people get frustrated, those things come out in different ways. But again, thank you for everyone who spoke. And as you saw tonight, when there's concerns, we take them into account. I'm happy that we could make the change to the proposed group of changes to our planning and zoning code even tonight. So further, I just wanted to ask if this individual over here didn't get a chance to speak earlier, and I didn't know if there was anything else.
You hijacking my meeting?
If the president might open up the floor. No. She did say it was her first time attending a council meeting, and I just want to thank her for being here.
Yes, I can talk. My name is Beverly Cash, and I live at 1153 Cindy Avenue. I'm actually here accompanying my scout son, who attend a meeting like this. And,
Well, you should have said he was a scout. And what troop is he from?
He's in disguise.
Yeah, if he wore his uniform, we would have known to recognize him from the beginning. Because was this your citizenship in government, or?
Citizenship in the community.
All right. Okay. Well, welcome. What troop?
Troop 65.
Great.
And your name?
Danny Cash.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
But I did think of an issue that I've been wanting to bring up.
Well, it has to be on the agenda. That's the only rule.
Is that expressed, because I did not know, so.
Yep.
So can you inform me on how I do that?
I'd be happy to talk to you after the meeting, if that's okay.
All right.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And good luck with your scouting. Ms. Warden.
I'd like to echo what some of my fellow council members have said. I appreciate the community support coming out to hear what Andrew has worked so hard on for our planning and zoning program. And I'm encouraged that there's so much community involvement. I think that really speaks highly of the neighborhoods that we foster here in Worcester. I'd also like to congratulate Chief Barry Saley and Nathan Murphy for their graduation. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor? It was a graduation?
That's correct.
And Tony Lemon and Victor Nadoma for their promotion to the captain status. And that's all.
Mr. Ansel.
Yes, compliments to Chief Fisher and Chief Saley, both, and Nathan also on the Ohio Fire Executive Certification and the ongoing pursuance of excellence in our safety services, and the two newest captains on the WPD. So administrations, again, kudos to you for challenging the status quo and allowing our safety service professionals to continue to develop and grow to better serve our citizens here in Worcester. So, and then Andrew, outstanding job, and Craig, and the other lady that has exited now on her drive home to Columbus, I would assume. I don't know.
Cincinnati.
Oh, Cincinnati, wow. From experience, I know the heavy lifting and the hard work that goes on in that process of updating the zoning ordinances. And it's remarkable to see the document that we have now, because 10 years ago we thought we had it really, really right too. But things evolve and change, and the hard work and the effort that goes into that is probably one of the most challenging things on City Council in that time period or in that time frame. You must be glad it's every 10 years, only every 10 years and not every 5 years, or you'd have more gray hair than me, Andrew. So again, well done. Thank you.
Mr. Cavan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I too just wanted to congratulate Chief Saley and Chief Nathan Murphy. Also, congratulations to Vic Nadoma and Tony Lemon on their promotions, and I think a couple other things I had were already talked about, so that's what happens when you're last. Thank you.
Mr. Bastanza?
Nothing more at this time, thanks.
I understand the CAT contract was signed. I would request that next year that come before council for final approval. And I would ask that the finance committee make sure that
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely,
included.
Mr.
So,
President.
because I think they were given a mandate, and hopefully they'll follow it. And this is just an aside. There's many people on council whose cards don't work to get into the building. I got a new one. It doesn't work, so I think probably the best thing is to give everyone new cards that actually do work. Mr. Paula was very kind to try to obtain one for me, and unfortunately,
I lost it already.
no, I took it back. Unfortunately, I went to try it. Luckily, I moved slow, so I didn't smack into the door.
Why don't you just tell him that you're keeping him out on purpose?
Well, I didn't feel so bad because Ansel's didn't work. And I didn't even see you pull out yours to try.
That's because mine would work.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going on, but everyone on council can't get into their own building and chambers.
Sounds like an inadvertent group setting that got changed.
So, well, I don't know who to address it to, so I'm addressing it to the powers of be. Andrew, again, thank you, and I appreciate you putting your toes to the fire tonight. And I see Mr.
Motion to
Ansel
adjourn, Mr. President.
move to adjourn, second by Mr. Byers. All in favor? We're adjourned.